no room for the weak. They taught you that love is forgiveness, that giving is noble, that gentleness is a virtue. But what happens next? The ones you love the most are often the first to hurt you, not because they're evil, but because they know you won't fight back. This isn't a video for dreamers. This is a survival guide for the man suffocating in his own kindness. If you've ever forgiven too easily, kept quiet to keep the peace, or regretted being too soft, then you're playing a game you were never meant to win. And Machiavelli, he never played that game. He never apologized for being cold. He taught this: if you can't be both loved and feared, then choose to be feared. Unconditional love is a strategic weakness. They tell you that love is the answer, that if you love deeply, give endlessly, and remain soft-hearted, the world will protect and reciprocate. But Machiavelli saw something most men ignore. Love, when left unchecked, becomes your greatest vulnerability. Why? Because love blurs calculation. It removes your filters, it softens your reactions, dulls your instincts, and clouds your strategic judgment. You begin to forgive things that don't deserve forgiveness. You justify actions that chip away at your dignity. And worst of all, you stop protecting your position. Let's say you love your partner, your best friend, or even a family member. So you tell them everything: your fears, your plans, your weaknesses. You forgive them early, explain your boundaries gently, or worse, never enforce them at all. And why? Because you assume, if I'd never hurt them, they'd never hurt me. Machiavelli would laugh, not because he didn't believe in love, but because he believed in power. He knew that even those closest to you will betray you, not always out of malice, but out of convenience. Familiarity breeds comfort, and over time, comfort breeds expectation. They begin to assume you'll always be there. You'll always forgive. You'll always bend. And once they believe that, they stop respecting your boundaries. Not because they want to harm you, but because they've stopped fearing consequence. The danger isn't in love. It's in how unguarded love turns into emotional exposure. And emotional exposure is the most easily exploited position a powerful man can be in. You must love with a plan, with a ceiling, with conditions. That doesn't make you heartless. It makes you wise. You don't owe unlimited access to anyone, not even the ones who say they love you most. If someone knows you'll never retaliate, never pull away, never say no, they'll take you for granted. Sometimes unintentionally, sometimes deliberately. But it will happen. The world rewards calculated love, not blind love. Even in war, soldiers protect their flanks. They don't assume their allies won't fire back one day. They set limits, they watch movements, they position their weapons just in case. Why would you treat your heart with less caution than a general treats his soldiers? Love isn't weakness, but leading with love without boundaries is. Machiavelli never said remove love. He said contain it, because when love has no limit, it becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice without recognition becomes emotional slavery. You don't stop feeling, you simply stop assuming that love by itself will keep you safe. From here on, every time you love, you ask, what am I giving up? And is there a return? That's not cold-blooded, that's clarity. The danger of familiarity: comfort kills respect your enemies. They watch you from a distance. They fear your silence. But your loved ones, they grow comfortable. They learn your kindness. They study your patience. And over time, they stop fearing you. And when fear leaves, so does respect. Machiavelli warned, it's not the outsiders that destroy you. It's the people inside your circle who stop believing you'll ever say no. Because the closer someone stands to you, the more likely they'll test your limits. Not always with bad intent, but with dangerous comfort. Here's how it happens. You start a relationship, romantic, familial, or professional, with warmth. You show up. You give your time, your energy, your loyalty. At first, it's appreciated, but eventually it's expected. They stop thanking you. They start demanding more. And when you pull back, suddenly you're the villain. This is how familiarity erodes power. People forget what you sacrificed. They only remember what you didn't give the next time. Love without structure turns you into a service provider. And if you're always available, always forgiving, always explaining, you become less of a man and more of an emotional ATM. Machiavelli understood this human truth. Comfort leads to laziness. Laziness leads to entitlement. And entitlement leads to exploitation. If they know you'll never enforce boundaries, they will keep pushing. So what's the solution? Set limits early, enforce them always, make your loyalty earned, not assumed. Let people see your warmth, but never without a wall behind it. Don't let access to you become so casual that people forget what a privilege it is. You don't have to be cruel, but you do have to be calibrated. Every time someone tests your limit and faces no consequence, you train them to test you again. A strong man doesn't remove people instantly. He recalibrates access. He lets them feel the shift. He doesn't argue. He changes the terms. Let others grow comfortable with their own weakness, but never let them get comfortable with yours. Silence is power. Never explain your boundaries. Most men fall into the trap of explaining their transformation. They pull back, say no, or take space, and then feel guilty about it. So they explain. They text long paragraphs. They justify their distance. They beg to be understood. Machiavelli would never. He believed that when you explain, you invite negotiation. And negotiation of your self-worth is the first sign of emotional surrender. Imagine you decide to stop chasing someone who constantly ignores your time. You step back and they text, "What's wrong with you? You're acting different." Most men reply, "I just need space. I feel disrespected." But the real answer should be silence. Why? Because real boundaries are not argued. They are enforced. The more you explain, the more power you hand over. And worse, you train them to expect a reason every time you evolve. A strong man acts. He doesn't announce. He moves differently and lets others feel the distance. And if they truly care, they'll ask the right question. Not "Why are you doing this?" but "What have I done to shift your energy?" That's the power of silence. It forces introspection. It makes people reflect instead of defend. Machiavelli taught, your power lies not in how loud you defend your boundaries, but how consistent you are in keeping them without flinching. You don't need validation for changing. You don't owe anyone an explanation for recalibrating. Every man must choose, do I keep the peace or do I protect my power? Because the peace you're keeping might just be everyone else's comfort with your weakness. The guilt reflex. How they negotiate your strength. Guilt is one of the most dangerous emotional tactics used against men who start setting boundaries. You say no, and suddenly you're reminded of all they've done for you. You protect your time, and they call you selfish. You stop overextending, and now you're not the same. This is emotional negotiation in its rawest form. Machiavelli warned, once they realize guilt can reverse your decisions, they will use it over and over again. And if you flinch, they file it. That moment of weakness becomes a permanent blueprint for manipulation. You must understand the game being played. This is not a conversation, it's a tactic. They aren't asking you to reconsider. They're testing your tolerance for emotional blackmail. You feel the pull. The voice in your head says, don't be too harsh, but remember, that's not your conscience. That's conditioning. You've been trained to feel guilt for choosing yourself. Break that habit. A strong man holds the line even when guilt enters the room. He recognizes guilt for what it is, a desperate move to preserve someone's unchecked access to you. Let them cry. Let them accuse. Let them mourn the version of you who always caved, because that version needed to go. You're not punishing anyone by holding firm. You're just retiring from being emotionally hijacked. The loyalty loop. Never let your consistency turn into a cage. You've been consistent, loyal, dependable. You show up. You check in. You're there when it matters. But here's the problem. If you're the only one doing that, it stops being admirable. It becomes expected. They stop reciprocating. They stop asking. They show up when it suits them. And you keep showing up, hoping your consistency will teach them how to treat you. It won't. Machiavelli would say, If your loyalty is predictable, it will be exploited before it is appreciated. Being the reliable one becomes your identity, but that identity becomes a cage. You feel trapped because you've trained everyone around you to expect selflessness. And the moment you try to escape that role, they say you've changed. They panic. Not because they love you, but because they've lost their emotional insurance policy. Your solution? Don't break your loyalty. Reframe it. Loyalty doesn't mean eternal service. It means showing up for those who value your presence, not for those who consume it like it's free. Being loyal is only strength when it's mutual. Otherwise, it's self-betrayal. Just this once. The slippery slope of compromise. It starts with something small. Can you cover for me just this once? Can you forgive that just this once? Can we skip your boundaries just this once? You agree. It feels harmless. You want to show compassion, but Machiavelli knew the truth. Just this once is never just once. The moment you break your own rule, even slightly, you've sent a message. My values are flexible as long as you're close enough. This is strategic pressure disguised as intimacy. People will always test limits, not to destroy you, but to map out what you'll tolerate. Once they see your boundaries wobble, they stop seeing you as a man of principle. You become pliable, negotiable, weak. The worst part? It rarely feels like manipulation. It feels like love, like compromise. But in reality, it's erosion, one boundary at a time. Machiavelli never punished often, but when he did, it was surgical, cold, final. You don't have to explode. You just stop giving access. And when they ask what's wrong, you don't debate. You don't explain. You say, that version of me no longer exists. Strong men don't fall apart. They solidify. Remember, the moment you betray your own standard, even out of affection, you've handed the other person control of the terms. That's not love. That's submission. The "you're too harsh" defense. When clarity is called cruelty. The minute you speak clearly, you're too cold. You set a boundary, you're stone-hearted. You ask for respect, you're suddenly arrogant. This isn't feedback. It's a tactic, a weaponized emotional reaction designed to make you feel wrong for evolving. But here's what they really miss. Not your kindness, your accessibility. They're not mourning the loss of your warmth. They're mourning the loss of control over the version of you who never enforced consequences. Machiavelli would say, let them speak. That's the sound of someone grieving the death of their advantage. You have to understand this. When people are used to you bleeding on command the moment you stop, they'll call you dangerous. But that doesn't mean you become cruel. It means you become clear. And clarity to the undisciplined always feels like punishment. Let them rewrite the story. Let them say you've changed. Because you have. You're no longer the man who explains every no, who absorbs every insult, who breaks every time someone pushes hard enough. You're not heartless. You're not detached. You're just finally immune to manipulation. Control through presence. How strategic distance wins respect. Most men think power lies in how far you can withdraw. But Machiavelli understood something deeper. Power lies in how precisely you manage your presence. A weak man pulls away in silence and disappears in resentment. But a strong man, he moves with purpose. He enters a room with clarity and exits before he's drained. You don't need to ghost people. You need to shift how you appear. Speak less. Move slower. Let them feel the absence of your energy, not just your body. You become the reminder, not the enemy, not the wreckage, but the echo they can't forget. It's not about revenge, it's about balance. When your presence becomes intentional, every moment you show up is powerful. You don't waste words, you don't chase, you don't fix what was never yours to hold. You let the silence do the math. If they rise to meet your new standard, you re-engage. If they don't, they were never meant to stay beyond the old version of you anyway. Power isn't distance, it's selectivity. And presence, when controlled, is your sharpest weapon. Final shift, when they lose access to the old you. This is where most men fail. They become stronger, sharper, clearer. But then, they feel guilty for the change. They want to be respected, but still liked, feared, but still approved. They crave evolution, but without confrontation. Machiavelli would laugh. He knew that power without loss is fantasy. You will be misunderstood. You will be called cold, detached, selfish. And yes, you will lose people who love the version of you that bled on command. Let them leave. Their discomfort is not your burden. It's their grief over losing access to the man who sacrificed his peace for their comfort. You're not being cold. You're becoming precise. You don't need to apologize for growing teeth after years of being prey. You're not too much. You're finally enough for yourself. And the men who live by this code, the men who stop negotiating their value, who enforce their boundaries with discipline, who love strategically and lead their own hearts first, they become untouchable, not because they're cruel, but because they are no longer emotionally available for exploitation. That's not detachment. That's dominance. And Machiavelli wouldn't just approve, he'd stand and applaud.